Welcome back. We are game 3004 in the winter 2021 semester, and it's week 6, part 1 of our broadcast. And I'm going to talk about where we are and what's happening over the next couple weeks. Let's get into this. So we're sitting at week 6 this week. We're kind of coming down to the last 2 weeks before the intersession break. So this week we're talking about how to select objects that are destructible, and we're fixing up some other things that we're going to be we talked about last week, which was nav meshes a little bit more. How do we do in-game object selection? And this week, from an admin perspective, your second playable release is due this Sunday, and that's the 21st at midnight. All right, so that is you and your team have to put together your second playable release, and I talked about what that all entails. Really what it is getting at least 50% of your assets in the game, like we talked about before, as well as getting other things ready to rock and roll in terms of your functionality for each game type, and those kind of things. And it's detailed all in the the document that I put up for the second playable release. All right, so I talked about the document last time. So that is due this Sunday at midnight. So hopefully you guys have more progress on your game and it meets all the criteria. The next thing that I got to talk about is that next week there is no exam for you guys, as mentioned before. The midterm exam is being replaced by a project checkpoint, which is project part 6. That's what this project part is for. It's going to be presentations, so there will be no labs next week as we normally had. What I will do is earlier in the week, like we did last time, is I will publish a little spreadsheet for you guys where you can sign up. I will produce a number of presentation slots throughout the day, and I'll try and give everybody about 15 minutes to present approximately, where you can show off your game and so on. So that will be it. Each team will have a presentation that they're going to do next week. The project checkpoint assignment, part 6, is due Wednesday night. So that's like not Thursday when we're presenting, but the Wednesday evening is when it's due. And that is a group assignment that you have to work on, but you'll be presenting live on Thursday, on the day that we get together next week. So that is what's happening next week. And then on the way back, when you come back from break, we're going to be talking about different things, the Quest system and some other graphic optimizations for 3D mobile games. We're actually going to move into the mobile part of our project, where we're also converting everything that you've made up until the middle of the semester, up until the checkpoint. We're converting everything then into mobile. So that's what's happening with our third playable release, which is due by the end of week 9. Then remember that the next several releases are all about mobile, and you're going to convert your games. You have really 2 games or 2 platforms you're running. One of them is your first platform is WebGL, and the second platform is your mobile, kind of mobile app that you're going to be running. Again, we're targeting Android, but you can also target iOS if you have that capability. It's totally fine. So that is the plan. This is where we're sitting right now. So in terms of what we did last week for our stuff, we talked about the mini map. We talked about post-processing effects. We discussed time of day system. We did a nav mesh, but it was localized to a specific map. And I talked about the difficulties of kind of making this procedurally generated AI agents with and without line of sight, mostly without line of sight. We talked about last week. I talked about the inventory system and how to put it together, but we didn't show it. Kind of we're able to build to WebGL pages. That's what we did last week. This week, we're going to continue with nav mesh, but we're going to basically talk about something called nav mesh components, which is built at runtime, which is kind of cool, so that it'll support things like your procedurally generated maps. We're going to start with the health system. We're going to develop a 3D or a world space health bar that is billboarded to the character's camera. We're going to talk about how to create destructible objects by adding the health bar to a destructible object, whether it's an enemy, so an animate object, or a inanimate object like a pillar, as an example. And then we're also going to be talking about how to do in-game object selection. The first way we're going to do is we're going to have, I've included a couple of shaders for you during our lab sessions, an outline shader and a silhouette shader. We're going to be talking about how to apply these to several materials and add them through code to your objects, as well as we're going to select an object by using a raycast. We're going to raycast from the player with a click. It's going to activate the material. That's what's going to happen on a particular object. And we're going to be able to swap out the material that's currently there or add materials that to the renderer, and it's going to create the outline or silhouette or both of those effects. So that's what's happening this week in lab. Okay, other things we have to talk about, which I want to talk about right now, are things that are due, project components. And this is part of what we're doing in this little hour that we have together. One is, again, second playable release that's due this Sunday. Project checkpoint, it's a big one. It's worth 10% of your final grade, replacing the midterm test. It's a group assignment, and it's due next Wednesday, not Thursday, next Wednesday at midnight. Okay, so that is when you have to complete everything. And there are several parts I'll go into what's required with that part coming up. Your team will present live during our lab and lecture time. So no lab and lecture, standard lecture next week. We'll be doing that part. And I will try and record the sessions so that way we can, if you missed it, you can go back and see people's games and so on. We'll see how that goes. The other one is the third playable release. I'm also going to talk about that today. That's due week 9. Other items that are due, the 5th weekly report is due this week. People continue to miss doing the 5th weekly or the weekly reports. Guys, you missed weekly reports. They're each worth 1% of your final grade. It's going to add up, and then at the end, it could eat 10% of your final grade just by not doing the weekly reports. I highly recommend you make it a priority. Every single week we have together, it takes very little time to set up, and it really is kind of shows your accountability for what you're doing with your team every single week that we're together. Your second peer review is also due this week on Sunday. So that is this week's Sunday is when this is due, along with your release, right? And the reason why I did that is so that way you can report on how things are going from the last release with your team. So this is a team thing. And again, it's a rating between 1 and 5 that I'm looking at for your second peer review. And then finally, your 6th weekly report, which is the final report before the break, is due next week. And again, we keep doing them over and over again. 6. And again, it kind of adds up with everything else you're doing. So it's worth quite a bit of marks. Okay, so in fact, if you add up everything, and if you miss all of your weekly reports, it can really bring down your GPA considerably. Okay, so that is what's due. Let's talk about a couple of things. First thing I'd like to talk about is project part 6. So this is I put this up on Blackboard, and it is the project checkpoint, and these are expectations for next week. Okay, so this is everything you need for week 7. Again, the due date for this, for you to complete the most of the parts, you can't obviously do this live. The live demo is going to be due on the Thursday. But the majority of everything you need to submit is on the Wednesday. So please have everything due next Wednesday at midnight, all right? Or else you're going to lose marks if you don't hand it in at the right time. This thing is now worth 100 points. Like normally I mark everything out of 100. This one is worth out of 30. And it's because there's 3 distinct parts that are equally weighted. All right, so here's how it goes. Your slide deck, you're going to come up with another slide deck. You can use the original one when you did your team introduction. You can use part of that one and modify it to include all the details that you know up until today. So the slide deck will include a title slide of your group name, all that kind of stuff, the name of your game, and so on. The team slide, there should be at least one slide with all the current images of your team members, including full names, student IDs, and any specialty role assigned. When I say see above, I mean like anything that we've talked about before. Like as an example, things like lead software engineer, producer, game designer, and so on. All those things is something you want to kind of list as underneath your team slide. You could have more than one of these, but I prefer if you have one team slide that covers everything, one slide, and so that it cuts down on your conversation. Your game overview. What is your game about? What game have you selected? Those kind of things are something you want to put in that one slide. Again, I'm looking for images for your materials more than words, because you're going to talk to these things. And then your MDA slide or slides. So things like your mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics that you're including in your particular version of the game type you've selected. And then I want to talk about your game type requirement progress. So there are a number of things that I've given you that you need to complete for each of the games. Some common requirements, as well as some game-specific requirements. I want updates. This could be one or more slides again. I want updates in terms of, has it been started? Has it not started? Is it in progress, or is it completed? Which one is it, right? So that way I can see where you are in terms of the game, and you're going to be kind of sharing that with everybody else. So not started, in progress, or completed. Some people color code these as not started as red, in progress as yellow, and completed as green. It's up to you. You don't have to color code it. I'm just looking for states for each of your game type requirements. When I say game type requirements, we can look at the original documents that we came up with for this thing. So if you look at the assignment, the first assignment document, which is your project part 1 or part 2, which is your team introduction, or your final project overview. Sorry, that's the one you want to look at. Let's look at that together. It's up on all these documents, by the way, are embedded. If it's a project part, it's going to be embedded inside of your Blackboard. It's up on Blackboard. But this one here, which is your final project overview, is what I'm talking about. So what role are you? This is going to go on your slide. So choose a role. You should have this already. If your role has changed, please make sure you update it on your slide. You kind of did this already. And then if we go down, you're making 3 types of games: a platformer, runner, shooter, isometric tower defense, or sandbox crafting game. And then you're going to have some common requirements. I want updates on each of these requirements. You're going to have a common requirements area. So one or more slides like this, right? So what about your camera controller? Is it working properly? How's your inventory system? What's your health system look like? What is your mini map? Do you have enemy AI? What about pausing, saving, and loading? Your sound effects and music. I want updates for all of this stuff. So is it in progress, not started, or completed? Which one is this, right? If there's a lot of them will be in progress at this point. There might be some that are completed. It really depends on your team. So that is your common requirements, and then your game type specific requirements. So that things like, let's say for a lot of you are making the 3D kind of platform runner shooter. So what about your 3D platforms? Are they in use? Did you which ones did you select? As an example, show us your how this has affected your level. Hazards, what are they? Talk about those things. Are they all selected? Are they all working? Again, by next week on on Wednesday, you should have at least half of all this stuff working, because 50% of the requirements were due this Sunday at midnight. 50%, right? And how is your goal? Your goal should be working by then. So some of this should be complete. Isometric tower defense, same thing. How is resource gathering working for you? Talk about resource gathering. Talk about your tower types. Talk about your enemy types. Sandbox crafting. There's only one group that's doing this. Talk about how you're procedurally generating everything. How's that working? What about your day-night cycle? How's that working? How about your destructible environment? And then discuss the level of completeness in terms of not started, in progress, or completed, and then discuss these things in your slides. So this may take one or more slides. That's why the document, which is your PowerPoint document, could be the slides I listed are the minimum number, all right, that I'm looking for. You could have more, but the whole discussion should take no more than 10 to 15 minutes. So that's like you're going to talk about your game in a lot more detail. That's what I'm talking about when I say your game type requirements progress. Indicate your progress on the requirements listed for your game type, right? Valid states are not started, in progress, or completed. And this should say for your game type. And I should also say, including all common requirements, which is really what I want. I want to see all the game. Like, where are you in terms of your state? This is like a project update more than anything else. All right, so that is your slide deck. Now, before you actually run your presentation, I want you to try it on video. So I want you to produce a video that is basically you voiceovering your presentation slide and a live demo. So that's what you're going to do. You're going to demonstrate it live. I don't need you to discuss your code in this video. Normally what I've asked you to do with your releases is tell me about your code. Tell me about what you've done here. Go into detail about how things are done. Here is what I'm looking for here is slightly different. I'm looking for your project's progress, right? As an example. I do want to see your backlog. So it's a good example to show your backlog in the project demo video. But I'm not going to ask you for your backlog during your live presentation. Okay, I'm not going to ask for that. I'm actually asking for more of this. This is more important to me, which is one or more slides around this. Okay. And then notice on the video it says your short video should not no more than 15 minutes because there's more to talk about here. And this is going to be a precursor of what we're going to be talking about in the final week of class, which is your final video, which is, okay, now we've moved into mobile. This is what we've kind of made. And that's what's going to happen. So this is part 2 of the assignment. Assignment part 1 is slide deck. Part 2 is demo video. Part 3 is your live demo. So your live demo, you're actually going to do during lab and lecture time. I'm going to provide you with slots. You're going to sign up, first come, first serve. You may select one or more presenters. However, I recommend that you only use your best presenter for this part, right? Your live demo will be marked on presentation value. So things like clear and confident speaking voice, right? That's what it should say, speaking voice, not this. Speaking of knowledge of the presentation materials. All right, so things like, you know your slides. You're not just reading the slides. It's not the first time you've looked at these things. You've had a hand in creating them, whoever you are. Enthusiasm for the game. Do you love your game? You know, as an example, if you don't love your game, then you shouldn't be the one presenting your project. And your ability to answer all questions. You should be someone who is able to answer all questions related to your project work. You must include the slide deck you created in part 1 for this assignment to frame your presentation. So you're going to have your slide deck, and just like you did your voiceover in part 2, right, as an example, which is your video, you're going to demonstrate your game live after you do your presentation slides, okay? And your game must be available to be play tested through a cloud provider of your choice live next week, which means all of us could go and play your game live if we want to. Okay, that is what's happening with the live demo. There is going to be additional work when we get together next week. I'm going to get you guys to provide feedback in terms of answering a survey. We've done this in the past, where you answer a survey and you give feedback to the other teams in terms of how they did, all right? And I'm going to have a much simpler survey, which is going to basically say rate the team from 1 to 5 in terms of several different criteria that you'll be marking, okay? So we're going to take that peer feedback into account. So in some sense, you are getting peer reviewed, right, by everybody that's here and myself, okay? That's what's happening. And this is for the live demo portion only. For this 10% is where you're gonna get some feedback on how you did. So this is your live demo. So requirements when you hand it in: a PDF of your slide deck, whether it's PowerPoint or Google Slides, a working link to your demo video, and a working link to your live site for your game hosted on a cloud provider of your choice. GitHub pages recommended, right? So it's 30 points out of 30 points. That's how it's broken out. So that is what's happening next week. Any questions around your project part 6, your project checkpoint that's happening next week? Again, materials due Wednesday. presentations to happen on Thursday. Any questions? Okay, thank you for that. Let's move on to the next piece. So that is, oh, I have a hand. Michael, talk to me. So the cloud link for everyone test would be builds be better for that than the project. Would a build be better for that than the project? Well, it is the cloud build, right? You're building to WebGL. That's what you're doing. So you're going to make a build and you're going to put it up on the live site. That's what you're going to do. So the live site has to be runnable, is what I'm saying. Just like we built to make it live in the past, Michael, we're going to do the same thing. You're going to do the same thing for next week as well. You're going to build to make it live. All right, so that means anybody can play your project by going to the link that you provide. Okay, so make sure you provide that link nice and clearly when you present next week. Okay. Thought like OneDrive and for zip. No. It's going to be live, like on GitHub Pages, or you can use another provider of your choice if you don't like GitHub Pages. If you want to use Google Cloud Platform or Microsoft Azure or some other cloud platform of your choice, you can do that too. I highly recommend GitHub Pages because it's free and it's really quick and easy to do. Okay, so that is for next week on Wednesday. Any other questions surrounding project part 6, the project checkpoint that's replacing your midterm tests? Again, we're 10% of your final grade due next week. All right, let's stop talking about this then. I'll just lower this one, put this away. And let's talk about the next piece, which is your third playable release. I want to talk briefly about this, and that's due the week following when you come back from break. So again, you're doing your project checkpoint next week, and when you come back, your third playable release is due on the Sunday, which is March 14th. That's when this will be due at midnight. So again, a few weeks out from now. Let's talk about this because I want to talk about the differences between each release. Each release has some things that I've asked you to do. Please read carefully to make sure that you hit all the requirements. This is not the one. This is the one. All right, so this is due week 9. So that's Sunday, March 14th, 2021 at midnight. This is project part 7, the third playable release. All right, so this is some stuff you need to have done. The third playable release, you will acquire or create as many graphics and sound assets as required to create at least 75% of your level. All right, so that means that your level should be 75% in play, if you will. And your mini-map, inventory, and health system should be fully functional for this release. So that's kind of a high-level overview of what I'm looking for your third playable release. And your group will have a 4th official iteration of your game design document. Every time you do a release, you have a GDD update that is required. So please make sure for the one that's due on Sunday that you go over the details that I've listed already when I released this, the second playable release, right, which is due Sunday. Make sure you go through as a checklist and check mark each of the areas here that I've had as bullet points, because they give you details on what you need to do. If there's any changes, they'll be listed here. Menu screen is the same as last time. Everything is working as before, except there's no need to make your load game option is not functional still at this point, because we're still going to talk about how to do that. Your option screen now will also allow key mapping. So you'll be allowed to use the command pattern or some other pattern where you can swap out the keys to have your player turn, and things like adding an inverted y-axis and so on. All the key mapping controls should be working and available to you guys in the next release, right? Your gameplay screen where everything happens, 75% of your assets should be ready to go in terms of enemies and all that kind of stuff. Your game must include an inventory system, like we said before, and if you're going to use drag and drop, if that makes sense for your game, your type of game, then drag and drop should be functional by next release, right? As well as if you're going to have some kind of selection mechanic, like for example, if I select an object and that's how I pick it up into my inventory, that also needs to be available and working by the next release. Some kind of selection, highlighting, all that kind of stuff to be added into your inventory system. Your game must include a health system, and the health system should be fully functional at this point, right? By the third release. And also, you can't save or load the game, but pausing the game should be fully functional by your third release. That's pretty simple to get done. As well as sound effects, at least 75% of all your sound effects should be added into various places now. Again, that 75% number. I'm trying to build you up so that by your alpha release, 100% of all your assets are in place and working, okay? Your game will include several game soundtracks. Dynamic sounds are required for this release. That means if you have a battle sound that you want to play when the enemies are really draining the player's health, or if there's danger because it's nighttime and you're stepping out for this kind of thing, then that is dynamic sounds, and the sounds will change according to the conditions. Again, your sound manager, if you have someone like that, a sound engineer, should worry about this part, because this is the part that makes the game more exciting. It gives feedback to the player that, hey, something's happening, you're in combat, or you're in danger of dying. Okay, and then those are the common requirements that are due by the next release. And then here are the game type specific requirements. For 3D platforms, again, all your platforms by this point should be in play by the third release. Okay, so if you don't have them all in now, then they should all be in by next time. If you already have them in, fantastic. That's great that you've got everything going. This is when I need them in. The stuff that I've put in here are the requirements that I need to have working by this particular time. If you're ahead of the game, fantastic. Right? It's okay. If you already have all this stuff, then it's an easy release for you, right? Hazards, at least 2 hazards, right, should be functional. I only made 1 hazard before. 2 hazards should be functional by this release, all right? And the goal, of course, should be working. So that's your platform runner shooter option and the details for that thing. Your isometric tower defense, things like drag and drop functionality is preferred and is required for this release. So if you're picking up items, as an example, and you're moving them around, for you guys, for resource gathering, most likely you're going to do that where you allocate resources to build towers and those kind of things. Chances are you need some kind of drag and drop functionality to be working for your inventory system. Tower types. All towers should be fully functional at this point by your third release. And enemy types, you should at least have 2 enemy loadouts working and ready to go for your this release. Okay, so 2 enemy loadouts. If you have more than 2 already, fantastic. And if they're all working, but they should be fully functional by this release. Sandbox crafting and survival game. So 75% of your level should be ready for testing, and that means you should be able to completely build and instantiate 75% of your level. The reason why I'm not saying 100% is because there might be some additional things like on top of the actual ground that you haven't included. Like, for example, you might have trees, but maybe you don't have rocks, right? Or, something like that. There might be things that are missing from your procedural generation other than just the landscape, because the landscape is only one part of it, remember. And then ensure you include appropriate shaders, outline, and silhouette where applicable. Here's an example of that. When it comes to selection, because you need a selection mechanism to select an object that you're going to pick up, as an example, and put into your inventory. Okay, so I'm just mentioning for you, you have more challenges than the others because your inventory is a lot more detailed than some of the other inventory systems. Day or night cycle should be mostly working. Use of color grading and post-production is required. And I also talked about using a nav mesh component system, which I'll be talking about today. So this is something that I want you guys to use or something like it, whether it's nav mesh components or some other way of navigating the procedurally generated environment where enemies have no problem getting to you, okay? And then, of course, the destructible environment is required by this release. So most of the stuff that you're doing is going to be ready to go by the third release. And this is because you have a lot more to do with this when it comes to the mobile portion of things happening in the second half. Okay, so that's something that has to happen. Fourth draft of your game design document is going to be updated. That's for everybody. The demo video is for everybody. Your version control is for everybody. And of course, since you've already deployed live, now this is a formal requirement. Deploying live every single time from now on is something that you're going to be doing. And there also is going to be, after the third playable into alpha and beta and so on, because we're moving into mobile space, you're actually going to be testing live on a mobile device as well and demonstrating it. Okay, so that's kind of the stuff that you're going to be doing coming up. So we're ratcheting up some of the components, but it's just a build. It's building up slowly, slowly, slowly. More for project management. I want to see your update. And then here are all the details for the requirements. So everything is the same except for the common requirements are slightly lower, and I've added some marks for your live site, okay, for your build. So that is due, again, for those people who came in late. As an example, it is due week 9, Sunday, March 14th, 2021 at midnight. It's giving you a little bit of time to get everything done, but it builds on the stuff that you've been doing so far. All right, any questions or concerns for your project part 7, which is your third playable release? So I think this gives you a good trajectory, guys, in terms of getting it done. Once you get your third playable release done, 75% of your game is working and it's ready to go and test on mobile. When I say live, Salik, I mean that in the next release after this one, right? After the third playable release, when you go to your alpha, it should be playable on a mobile simulator, right? Or emulator, if you will. So just like we did last time with, with mobile simulation last semester, we kind of talked about how to do that with 2D. We're going to do it. We're going to be doing everything with 3D. I mean, that means in the mobile simulator, it's got to have different touch controls. That's going to be the difference in your alpha compared to your third release. So planning those kind of things is probably something that you want to put inside of your mind, because and then adjusting, adding additional widgets or gizmos that you want to display in your screen for mobile touch and all those kind of things to support a 3D environment, dragging and dropping, all that kind of stuff. You're going to do things with anything that you would have done, as an example, with your WebGL game. It has to be available to be done with your mobile, and your WebGL will be another build as well as a fallback, right? Worst case scenario when it comes to testing. So you test it in WebGL and then you deploy it to mobile, and you have those two platforms that you're testing for. Great thing about this is you can show off your mobile game, right? Part of your mobile game as a WebGL build, right? To test your WebGL build and have your other people in your team test it as well. And then what you're going to do is you're actually going to test it in a mobile environment, so a simulator as an example, which is going to be, kind of the thing we did last time with your mobile simulator, which is LD Player, or you can use, BlueStacks or whatever you feel like using. Okay. So that's kind of the way it's going to be coming up in the alpha build. So this is going to be preparing you for that, the third playable release. All right, so that is your project update. I want to say that I've been looking at some of the stuff that you've handed me for your first playable release. I think most of you guys are on the right track. I'll be honest with you that I think that I'm really quite happy with most of your progress. There's some groups that are a little bit behind or missed a requirement. And I'm not sure if all of you are looking at these documents. I've given you all the documents you need up online. So please, project managers, for the people that are out there that are project managers, please look. If you look in your assignments section, right? So again, Blackboard, I've kind of outlined it. So you have an assignments area. Your assignments area have all the project pieces, and inside each of the project pieces are embedded each of these documents. So the documents you can find for all your requirements are in here. Some of you missed requirements, and the biggest problem with that is, when it comes to marking, is I mean, it's a bit of a hit in terms of, what you're going to lose. Your marks are going to be updated soon. Yes, I'd like to do that, Kat, as soon as possible, right? Because at the end of the day, most of you, again, did everything fine, but there are some issues. And I mean that in terms of you missed a requirement. Please go through the requirements document. So Kat, you and all the other, project managers or producers, please go through it and make sure you go through check marks with everybody when you do your next meeting and go, okay, do we have this? We have this. We have this. Tom asked for all these things. Do we have all those things? And if you do, you're golden, because I'm only marking you on the things I've asked you to produce. If you have extra stuff, great. But you're not getting a bonus marks for stuff that you've added in ahead of time. I'm only looking at the requirements that I've asked for that particular release. And some of you have added additional functionality, and it's great. But I haven't asked for that stuff. I'm looking for only the requirements that match the things that I've asked for, right? So that's how I'm marking you. Bonus marks are going to come too, but I'm first looking for those pieces. Okay, any other questions or comments? So again, lots of stuff, but this is your project update. Again, just like we did last time, I'm going to put up an Excel file that I want you guys to, or it'll be a Google file, Google Docs equivalent, or Sheets, and you'll be going up, and I'll share that with you shortly. I will share that with you up online. You go up and sign up, and then you're good to go. So questions around the structure or anything else that we have. Again, please, if you don't forget to hand in your 5th weekly report. If you missed the other ones, you can't go back. Okay, there's no going back and doing a report that from last week or the week before. It's not relevant. People have asked me to say, like, okay, I missed last week's report. Can I hand it in? No, you can't hand it in. It's gone. That's your weekly report. It's almost like you didn't check in that week. You've lost your stuff. Remember that I'm not marking you on every single weekly report. You need to do 10, I believe, out of 12. So if you miss 2, you're okay. But if once you go beyond that, then you risk losing 1%, which is so easy to kind of put together. You're literally putting a 5-minute report together to get 1% of your final grade individual. I think it's pretty good in terms of the expectation here. Okay, so, and the other thing is your peer review. I know that some of you don't like doing peer reviews, but it's anonymous, right? If you don't hand in your peer review, if you don't submit your peer review, again, you lose 1% right off the top. And remember that what I'm doing is with the peer review is I'm going to, and this is why it's taking me a little longer to do the marking, Cat. I've looked at everybody's stuff. It's because I need to make some adjustments to people's marks based on the peer review. For the most part, there's no adjustments for the most part. All right, I'll tell you right now, most people, everyone loves each other for the most part. But like I mentioned last time, there are a couple people in the class that people don't like. And I mean like in the group, not just like as in popularity, as in they're not doing what they're supposed to do, which is surprising at this point in the game because you guys are 3rd year. You should all know each other, theoretically. And people that are on your team are people who are known. So if the person's not working out and you've included them in the team, and for the person who's not working out, you know who you are, right? Because I'm sure that the team has given you feedback already, right, in one way or another, telling you that, hey, you know what, we really need you to do this work or whatever, and you're not pulling your weight. It's probably already been said to you. I'm very surprised at this point in the 3rd year that you're not doing what you're supposed to do. But again, it happens. There could be many reasons for this. It could be, part of it could be COVID. Part of it is because, all of us have been working remotely, and working remotely in groups and teams is more challenging than working together, and so on. But those are the kind of things that we need to talk about, and that's what the peer review system is for, to say, you know what, I've got, my team is doing great, and here's what I've contributed for this release. Each peer review is synchronized with each release. There's going to be like 6 of them, right? So this is the 2nd one in a row, and I believe you're getting marked on 4 out of 6. And that's in the original document. Let's take a look at that before we stop, and then I'll let you guys go, and then we'll start off our official lab at 3 o'clock. Let's take a look at that 1 second before we continue. and I want to make sure that we're all on board in terms of what is required. So again, going back to the document outline, that's why I'm showing you this. You can see that 10 out of 12 weekly reports is what you're being marked on individually, and 5 out of 6, not 4 out of 6, 5 out of 6 peer reviews are what are required. And this is the breakdown of all the marks or where you're getting all your marks. So please make sure, because these individual components add up to 15% of your final grade, plus your peer review will affect your individual release marks. Because if you get bad, and I mean bad like a 0 or a 1 out of 5, as an example, from enough players in your team, like if your team is saying basically you're not working, it's going to affect your final mark for each of the releases that the peer reviews are for. There are 6 releases, like actual releases, where it says release. So first playable, second playable, third playable, alpha, beta, and final. That's 6 releases, right, as an example. And they get more and more weighty as we get to the end, right? So it could really damage your marks if you're not pulling your weight. So please make sure you do that, because that's how we're doing it this semester. Okay, that's it for my update. Any questions around anything we have today? Okay, guys, then if there are no other questions, I'm going to stop recording this part, and then I'll see you for lab number 2, which is coming up at 3 o'clock. I'm not going to stop this Zoom session, but I will stop the YouTube session, and then we'll take a short break, about 10 minutes or so, and we'll get right back into it with lab 2. All right, thanks so much for coming out, and I'll see you guys in lab 2.